The morning sun pours into Sarah's little bakery as the bell above the door chimes repeatedly, signaling the start of a new day. The smell of fresh bread and cinnamon swirls in the air as Sarah, with a practiced hand, pipes icing onto cupcakes and serves up steaming cups of coffee. Her laughter is genuine, and her energy is infectious. She knows most of her customers by name, asking about their kids and their jobs, making each feel like the most important person in the room. This is her world, a hub of community and warmth in the heart of the city. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Jason settles onto the cold concrete. His spot for the day is against a fence, the city's bustle unfolding around him like a movie he's no longer a part of. People pass by, some with averted gazes, others with a nod, but most are lost in the rhythms of their own lives. His sign, "Hungry, anything helps," flutters in the breeze. Another piece of the scenery rarely noticed. Welcome back to PlotTwister. Before we unravel today's mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you're always in the loop. As the afternoon sun begins its descent, Sarah steps out for a breath of fresh air. It's then that she sees Jason. Their eyes meet. No words are needed. She returns to the bakery and soon emerges with a sandwich, the kind made with care. The handoff is simple. A moment of humanity against the backdrop of a city that never pauses. For Jason, it's a rare taste of kindness, a reminder that hope is sometimes handed to you on rye bread with a side of compassion. Unbeknownst to Sarah, their exchange has attracted attention. A figure, obscured by the distance, takes note. The figure's interest seems piqued, not by the act of charity, but by the recipient. This interest is silent, watchful, and as the day wanes, it becomes a shadow that clings to the edges of our story, silent yet charged with intent. As the sun sets, casting long shadows on the streets, Sarah closes up her bakery. She's content, feeling that today she's made a small difference. Jason finds a corner to settle in for the night, the sandwich a small buffer against the gnawing in his stomach. Both are unaware of the eyes that have followed their interaction, unaware that this day of all days has set a chain of events in motion that will soon come knocking in the most unexpected of ways. Sarah's morning began as it always did, with the whir of the coffee grinder and the sweet aroma of pastries in the oven. But amidst the morning rush, a flicker of unease brushed her spine, a sensation she couldn't place. She shrugged it off, chalked it up to a lack of sleep or maybe too much caffeine, but the feeling lingered, stubborn as a stain. The bakery, a hive of activity, saw the ebb and flow of patrons, yet today the bell above the door seemed to toll with a different timbre. Midday approached, and with it came a phone call. Sarah answered, expecting the usual supplier chat, but instead silence greeted her before the line went dead. An innocent wrong number, perhaps, but it left her with a knot in her stomach that wasn't there before. Later, as Sarah tidies the counters and lined up the day's remaining pastries, a series of peculiar events unfolded. A customer lingered a little too long, a car parked across the street sat with its engine running, and the sense that she was being watched grew from a whisper to a shout in the back of her mind. She told herself it was nothing, just the fatigue speaking. The bakery closed, the sun dipped below the skyline, and the neighborhood settled into the quiet of the evening. But the silhouette of an unmarked car lingered, the glow of its occupants' devices casting an eerie light. Figures in the car appeared to be surveying Sarah's home, their presence an unspoken threat veiled by the night. Sarah drew the curtains tighter that night, a shiver running down her spine. Night wrapped around the city, a blanket under which its inhabitants found rest, but for Sarah, sleep was elusive. She turned over in bed, the events of the day replaying in her mind like a film stuck on loop. The strange phone call, the idling car, the prickling sensation of eyes on her, all these things wove a tapestry of tension that hung heavy in her room. As she finally drifted to sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that the world she knew was about to change. Before the sun had even dared to peek above the horizon, the sound of a door being forcefully knocked would have jolted anyone awake. That morning, the sound thundered against Sarah's front door. Disoriented, she stumbled from her bed, her heart pounding against her ribs as if trying to escape. The authoritative voices that followed were just as startling, demanding she open up. As the door burst open, Sarah stood frozen, a flood of uniformed officers pouring into her home. They moved with precision, their heavy boots marring the softness of her living room rug, their hands steady as they raised their weapons and shouted commands that tangled in the early morning haze. Sarah could only muster a weak, "What's going on?" Her voice was a fragile thing amidst the chaos. The officers were methodical, flipping cushions, opening drawers, their hands clad in gloves as they sifted through Sarah's life with invasive curiosity. Every family photo was inspected, every book removed from its shelf. The sanctity of her home was shattered, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable. Sarah watched, helpless, as her world was turned inside out, with no explanation as to why. In a small, sterile room with nothing but a table and 2 chairs, Sarah sat across from an officer whose badge read interrogator. Questions were fired at her like bullets from a gun. They asked about her whereabouts, her relationships, her recent interactions. Sarah's responses stumbled out, tripping over confusion and fear. She repeated over and over that she had no idea why this was happening, her innocence a chorus that fell on deaf ears. Outside, neighbors gathered in small, worried clusters, their faces etched with concern. They whispered amongst themselves, speculating, wondering if the Sarah they knew was not who she seemed. Rumors began to take root, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Sarah, the heart of the neighborhood, the woman who knew their coffee orders by heart, was now the center of a spectacle none could comprehend. The sense of community that Sarah had fostered seemed to waver in the face of the unknown. The day after the raid, the once bright interior of Sarah's bakery seemed to absorb the mood of its owner, muted and shadowed, despite the morning light. Sarah moved through the motions, serving customers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. In the quieter moments, her gaze would drift off, lost in thought. Regulars exchanged concerned glances, but said nothing. The air was thick with unasked questions. In the midst of kneading dough, Sarah paused. Her hands, once sure and steady, now trembled slightly as she replayed the raid over in her mind. There had to be a reason, a mistake, something that led the officers to her doorstep. Determined, she wiped her hands on her apron and decided she needed to find answers. Officer Martinez walked into the bakery, his uniform standing out against the backdrop of pastel tablecloths. The customers' chatter dipped to a hush. Sarah's heart skipped. Was he here for her? But his approach was friendly, his demeanor open. He ordered a coffee and, with a sympathetic tilt of his head, offered a listening ear. Sarah sensed an ally. In a conversation that was equal parts questioning and cathartic, Sarah learned of a manhunt that had gripped the area, a fugitive, dangerous, and elusive. Officer Martinez spoke in generalities, careful not to breach protocol, but his eyes held a message of consolation. It was a case of mistaken identity, he implied. Wrong place, wrong time, but he couldn't say more. The bakery's door chimed as the last customer left, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. It was then that she noticed a new face across the street, a man shrouded in the anonymity of the city, yet whose attention seemed firmly fixed on the bakery. He didn't enter, nor did he move on, his stillness a stark contrast to the city's rhythm. Sarah felt a new thread of the mystery tug at her, the presence of this observer, a silent puzzle piece in a game she didn't understand. As dawn broke over the city, Sarah, with dark circles under her eyes, began piecing together the scattered jigsaw of her situation. She retraced her steps, pondered every recent interaction, and questioned the fleeting faces that had become a part of her daily routine. There was a missing link somewhere, a detail she was overlooking, and she was determined to uncover it. At the bakery, in between serving the swirl-topped cupcakes and frothy lattes, Sarah replayed her conversation with Officer Martinez. His words were a coded message, one she was slowly deciphering. The vague references to the manhunt, the implicit assurance of her innocence, it all pointed to something more than just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mid-afternoon, as the bell above the door announced another visitor, Sarah looked up to find Officer Martinez stepping in, not as a law enforcer, but as a bearer of news. He revealed, in hushed tones meant only for her, that the fugitive they had been chasing bore a striking resemblance to an acquaintance of hers. The revelation sent a shock through her. Could it really be someone she knew? As the pieces fell into place, a look of understanding washed over Sarah. She remembered the stranger from the day before, his out-of-place demeanor, his watchful eyes. It was then she saw him again, outside, looking in with a strange focus. Her breath caught in her throat as realization dawned. He was not just a passerby. His attention was not born of curiosity, but of duty. The bakery's warm atmosphere filled with a new sense of hope as Sarah's neighbors and friends, once so shaken by the sight of police tape and flashing lights, now rallied around her. The sense of community that had been tested was now stronger than ever. They organized support, lined up at her door not just for her pastries, but to stand by her in solidarity. As evening set in, Sarah's once upturned world began to right itself. Jason, the man she'd helped, returned to the bakery, not as a figure of sympathy, but as a success story. With the community's help, he had found a job and a place to stay. He was no longer just a man on the street, he was part of the community, part of the story's happy ending. The twist had unraveled, and with it, the tension eased. Sarah's bakery thrived once again, not just as a place for sweets and treats, but as a symbol of resilience, a testament to the spirit of the neighborhood. And as the open sign flickered to life each morning, it wasn't just announcing the start of business, it was a beacon of the unwavering strength found in kindness and unity. With the morning light casting a soft glow through the bakery windows, Sarah took a moment to savor the quiet before the day began. Today felt different. Today, she would get the final piece of the puzzle that had upended her life. Officer Martinez had promised to stop by with news, and the wait was almost over. The door chimed, and Sarah looked up to see Officer Martinez enter, his face no longer etched with the stern lines of duty, but with the gentle curves of relief. He explained that the fugitive had been caught the night before, in a scene much less dramatic than the one that had played out at Sarah's home. The chase was over, and with it, the shadow that had loomed over her life had been lifted. As Sarah listened, the tension that had coiled tight within her began to unwind. The man they had mistaken Jason for had been captured, and it was a case of mistaken identity that had led them to her door. There was an apology in Officer Martinez's tone, one that was echoed by the department. The relief was palpable, filling the bakery with an almost tangible warmth. With the truth revealed, the neighborhood began to buzz with the news. They celebrated the end of the ordeal with an impromptu gathering at Sarah's bakery, where coffee flowed freely and pastries seemed to disappear as soon as they were placed on the trays. Laughter echoed off the walls, and the air was thick with the sweet scent of baked goods and redemption. Jason stood behind the counter, no longer the man with the cardboard sign, but an employee with a badge and a purpose. He was learning the ropes quickly, his new life a stark contrast to the one he had known before. He handed a coffee to a customer, his smile genuine, a mirror of Sarah's own. The story that began with an act of kindness had come full circle. Sarah's bakery had weathered the storm and emerged as a beacon in the community. The narrative of misunderstanding and fear was replaced with one of togetherness and hope. As Sarah placed the closed sign in the window that night, she didn't just lock up her shop, she closed a chapter on an experience that would forever remind her of the strength of community and the power of a simple act of kindness. What are your thoughts on the twist we uncovered today? Comment your ideas below, and make sure to like and subscribe for a daily dose of drama and mystery. See you later with another twist.